Forged on the gridiron in September. Perfected in the magic of March. For the fans who love the crunch of the pads. Prefer a dunk. And expect nothing but the best. This was the Big Ten. Now this is Bigger Ten. Here's Steve Dace.
And greetings. Welcome to another edition of Bigger Ten. I'm Steve Dace, joined by my co-host, never partner, Aaron McIntyre. And Aaron, I got to tell you, I went to the Iowa Barnstormer game over the weekend. Try to get to one of those, usually late in the season, just when I'm ready to get amped up for football season again, just a little appetizer, you know?
Yeah.
Had a couple of young men, a little younger than you, come up to me. And they said, "Where's your co-host, never partner?" Because they have been, they've basically been watching Bigger Ten since they were kids.
Wow.
Going back to when it was John Miller and I. So now, because we're guys, I never got their names, right? But you guys know who you are. So shout out to you guys. And I thought you would appreciate that. Aaron, how are you doing, brother?
Doing all right. It's interesting, you know, people come up for our day job fairly regularly, but it's really disconcerting. Well, not disconcerting. That's a bad word, but it's disconcerting a little bit when people recognize you from this and only this. That's happened a couple of times, but ready to get going. I mean, it's a week from tomorrow. NFL season kicks off, and I know that's not NFL football, but we're really in the thick of it now as we're taping this. Day 2 of Big Ten Media Days is up and running. Dan Lanning is at the podium as we're taping this. We'll react to all of that, I think, next week. And next week is when the, don't call them summer training camp, but fall camp kicks off for most of the college football schools around the country. And then after that, it's time for the Big Ten bus tour. So it is happening. It's really here. College football and football season in general is really here.
Well, let's spoil the whole thing then, shall we?
Yeah.
All right, let's go through some of my college football preview. The whole thing is available for free on our Patreon page at patreon.com/Michigan Podcast, patreon.com/Michigan Podcast. But we're going to go through a couple different parts of the preview on this week's show. We're going to go through my Power 4 conference predictions, how I think all the Power 4 conferences will finish. We'll give you a little bit more detail here on the program when we get to the Big Ten, how I think that's going to go. And then in the next segment of the show, we're going to take a look at the postseason, how I would project the college football playoff, the final playoff rankings, the playoff bracket itself, as well as the various bowl pairings, both for Big Ten teams and teams across the country. So, Aaron, you ready to go?
Let's do it.
All right, let's start here with the ACC. And again, I do this game by game based on my power ratings and you know, upset spots and sandwich game spots. I do go back and I keep a database to make sure I don't have teams doubled up, and I've got the records all add up and they're all congruent. That's how seriously I take this, or maybe as much as maybe I need a girlfriend or a wife, which I have, and she's always amazed how much I'm able to figure out how to do this and not be a perpetual virgin. But here we are. These are my predictions for the ACC. I think Clemson will repeat. I think Clemson's the only Power 4 repeat champion this year. I think you can see in that league, I don't have a lot of teams getting to bowl eligibility in that league. I really only have a couple of teams even really being in the playoff hunt, and I have Clemson beating Miami, quarterbacked by Carson Beck, Georgia transfer. I got to tell you, man, I don't know if you saw the Miami green with the black that he was wearing at ACC Media Days yesterday. Dude looked like he was about ready to step, and with the gold chain, my man looked like he was about ready to step onto the set of the Miami Vice reunion. Okay?
No, he looked like Sid the Sloth is what he looked like.
Did you see what Mark Richt said to him?
No.
He goes, "Hey, man, I went from Georgia to Miami too, just like you as a head coach, but you got paid more than me." I thought that
probably true.
That probably is true, as a matter of fact. All right, so what sticks out about my predictions for the ACC? You can see I'm really high on Duke. That was one of my win total best bets for this coming season. So who do I have too high? Who do I have too low? What's your overall thoughts here of the Atlantic Coast
Well, you
Conference?
already mentioned two of them. How many teams are just struggling in their overall record to get to bowl eligibility? Not a strong conference. It's not like that's news to us. So that's the first thing that jumped off the page to me. The second thing is Duke is just pretty consistently now, regardless of coach, they're just kind of in the upper echelon of the ACC. Does that say more about Duke or more about the ACC? To me, it says at this juncture, it says more about Duke. I think they're actually getting serious about football. And, they've tried for a while now, but reaching a record of 9-3 at Duke, that's a pretty big deal if that were to come through. But it's like we're getting used. We were expecting after Elko departed to Texas A&M, I expected them to take another step back. They really didn't. They got off to a pretty good start last season, and it looks like you see them continuing that. And I don't have any reason to disagree either. I think Louisville and Duke, you could probably flip a coin. I mean, they're tied in their overall record, but Duke has one more conference win than Louisville. I think you could kind of flip a coin there as to those two. But otherwise, no, I can't really. Once you get down past like Georgia Tech, I mean, Florida State, I mean, is his job going to be?
Well, let's talk about that. Mike Norvell, you're talking about. So
yes.
they went 2-10, which is, amazeballs.
Yes.
Okay. And you're talking about them going 7-5, which when you typically go from 2 to 7 wins, you might be conference coach of the year.
But when you were undefeated 2 years ago.
Yeah, and he brought in 2 huge coordinators. Tony White, that we know from Nebraska, did a great job for Matt Rule last year. And then Gus Malzahn, who, of course, took a team in Auburn to the national championship game and won some games at Central Florida. So he's got big-name coordinators. They play a very difficult schedule. Do you think that's enough to save his job for Mike Norvell? I think it probably is, but it's borderline, I think.
If they have a marquee win, definitely. 7-5, definitely. If it's a 7-5 like Nebraska's, what were they, 6-6 last year, where they didn't really have any marquee wins, it showed signs of progress. I'm not quite sure. So if they've got a marquee win in there somewhere against one of the top 4 teams, top 3 teams that we're talking about who might be playing for a college football playoff berth, then maybe. But if this lacks any signature win, then no.
What do you think about Belichick going 6-6 at North Carolina in his first year?
It's so hard. It seems like he really likes this. It seems like he likes being a college coach.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's messaging everything the right way. But when camp starts here in a week, is he really going to like the idea that technically, yeah, they're getting paid, but it's not the same deal as the NFL? Is he really going to enjoy that? I don't know. I'm dubious. So we'll see how his players respond. To me, I think that's something that's going to be completely unknowable until we're about 3 or 4 weeks into the season. How are his players responding to his style of coaching?
Well, you can see, looking at those standings, I'm a buy low on Duke. They're over their win total is one of my win total best bets, and I'm a sell high on Syracuse, who was great in Fran Brown's first year, but lost a ton. And that schedule, we talked about that all offseason last year, that it was really set up for Syracuse. And, man, they exploited it. They won 10 games, all right? But the schedule they have this year, it looks a little bit like the ACC version of Oklahoma and Florida. So good luck. And speaking of high variance, like Syracuse, how about a conference that is going to probably be high variance, Aaron, every single year? And that's the Big 12. Last year, Arizona State was picked last, won the league, and kind of won it resoundingly, and just absolutely deconstructed, just dissected Iowa State in the conference championship game and took Texas down to the wire in the playoff. So this is a very high variance league, and the blue chip ratio that Bud Elliott's put together for like the last 15 years or so, no team in the Big 12 is higher than 26% of its roster being blue chip recruits, and that's TCU. So a lot of this is, can we win single score games? Can we win the turnover battle? Okay. How do we coach in the fourth quarter when it's tight? I like Baylor. I think Sawyer Robertson was a bit of a revelation a year ago. I think they have a very favorable schedule. They're playing the right teams at home as opposed to on the road. I like Utah with a massive bounce back. I mean, Aaron, without a quarterback, they were 1-5 in one-score games last year. They didn't have a quarterback because of Cam Rising. I think Devin Dampier, and you're bringing in his quarterback, kind of what Oklahoma is going to do with John Mateer. I think Devin Dampier, in a league that is not very physical defensively, you're going to get by, I think, with a running style of quarterback as physically gifted as him. That's probably not going to take as much of a beating as he would if he's going to try that in the Big Ten or the SEC. So I think a massive bounce back for Utah in what could be Kyle Whittingham's swan song. I think Kansas State's kind of mired in this one spot here, kind of an 8-4, 9-3 team until Avery Jones lives up to that recruiting promise. I think Arizona State's still going to be pretty good, but I think no Cam Scatteraboo. I mean, he really was the inspirational leader of that team. I think Sam Levitt's getting a little too much hype in this preseason. I think Cam Scatteraboo basically put that team on his back, but they do still return a ton. Schedule's not quite as favorable, but following up last year's shocking championship with 9-3, that's nothing to be ashamed of. Then you see the big money team there, Texas Tech, maybe the most expensive payroll in all of college football. And they're thinking it's Big 12 championship or bust. I've got them hovering just around there. I think Iowa State takes a step back without those receivers. I thought the receiving crew, and both those guys were picked very high in the second round of the NFL draft. That receiving crew gave them a margin of error they have typically not had because of their ability to hit big plays, even in crunch time, as your Hawkeye saw a year ago. I think they're going to miss those guys, but still be relatively solid. You see BYU there. I did this preview before Jake Ratzliff was gone. I'd probably drop them down.
Did you see Ari Wasserman's tweet about that?
No, what did he say?
He said BYU to Jew Lane.
Nice.
And he's a Jew himself, so he can say that.
He gets to say that, yes. I'd probably drop them, say, another game. If I had to give you a candidate, Tom Fornelli at CBS Sports, he did this thing where he bet every single Big 12 team to win the championship because he just thought all their odds were valid. If I had to pick an Arizona State, I'd pick Cincinnati. Decent quarterback, decent defensive line, favorable schedule. They open up with Nebraska, but it's at Arrowhead. The Huskers better be on a lookout for that game. But you can see I've got Colorado crashing back to earth after last year's 9-3. Again, a very, very balanced league. So your thoughts, and I've got Baylor over Utah in the Big 12 championship game. What are your thoughts?
Two things that stuck out to me is that Rocco Becht is a very experienced quarterback, and you've got Iowa State not really being in it necessarily at the end of the season for the championship game berth. That jumped out to me, and I do not dispute you losing those weapons to the NFL. That's a big deal. And then Texas Tech, you already mentioned. A fifth place finish for all of the money that they've spent is probably not going to fly well. And 9-3 is good for Texas Tech normally, but then you put it in the context of how much money they've spent. But I think what you're actually telling me here, just to build a little bit of anticipation for the real deal football season, is that the result of the very first game of the season, Kansas State versus Iowa State, might actually determine those two teams' contention down the stretch to actually participate in the Big 12 championship game. So interesting analysis on Cincinnati as well, because you've got them finishing, 9th right here?
Yep.
But maybe I'll just put $1. Maybe I'll just take a page out of his playbook, put $1 on just every single one of these teams, to win the Big 12. I mean, you've got to be thinking once you get down into the lower half of this field, if one of them actually rises up, Oklahoma State. I forgot about that as well. Oklahoma State, you have them finishing last. Is he on the hot seat?
Yes. Now, the hot seat for Mike Gundy as one of the great players in program history and the greatest coach in program history
can get pretty hot.
Is a gold watch, probably. Okay, gold watch, have a nice life. We're going to name a building after you, but it's kind of time to move on. So when you have a team go from worst to first in a league like this, that means you had a wide variance team the other way, and that was Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State and Utah were the consensus preseason picks a year ago. Oklahoma State had an absolutely wretched season. They have something like 47 new players on the roster, a lot of new coaches. So can I sit here and say Mike Gundy, given his track record of success, doesn't pull a rabbit out of the hat? No. I mean, look at Central Florida. Central Florida last year, by the way, they were top 15 in the country in yards per play differential. They just invented ways to lose games a year ago. Now, you would normally say, in the old era, well, that just means now those guys are going to come back and they're going to get those breaks, right? That's kind of a Phil Steele metric kind of a thing.
Yeah.
But when you're looking at the transfer portal, Aaron, a lot of those guys that just had a lot of bad luck and despite a top 15 yards per play differential, getting their coach fired, those guys are mostly gone. And so it's there's so much turnover on these rosters, figuring out which kind of regression and progression metrics that tend to, evolve and revolve year to year. I don't know that those are going to be as relevant as they've been in the past when these rosters have so much turnover. It's the same name on the front of the jersey, but not a lot of the same names on the back. You have any thoughts on that?
Correct. I think what's going to be more there's going to be an entirely new set of statistics to try to predict some of these things that will be developed by the Phil Steeles of the world, because it's not going to be as clear cut. You're going to have statistics like, well, this guy has transferred 2 or 3 times. What was his production? It's going to be kind of a mess trying to figure these things out.
Yeah.
But I think the ultimate thing, though, is still what it really always has been with college football, but even more so. It'll be emphasized even more. What is the ability of your coach and coaching staff to be able to install new concepts, depending on the player, install new concepts in one offseason? What is their track record with doing that? And it's going to be better for some newer coaches and maybe worse for some coaches you've heard of for a long time. There's going to be different situations everywhere. That's not anything new with college football. But those are going to be really the benchmarks I think that you're going to have to look at, because you're absolutely right. When you have so much roster turnover, it's either going to be boom or bust. And I think a lot of that is dependent on how good your coach and coaching staff is on installing some of the new systems for these guys who transfer multiple times in their career.
Like in the NFL, we don't sit around here during the offseason in the NFL where at least 1/3 of every roster turns over every year. Since the modern divisional alignment was created in 1990, the league has averaged about 5.6 new playoff teams per year. So very high variance league, right? We don't sit around here all offseason talking about, well, they were -8 in turnovers last year, so they're probably due to catch some breaks the next. We don't do that. There's so much roster turnover. There's so much variance in the league that we don't sit there and just assume that statistical anomalies one direction will work themselves out in the next direction the next year, right? And I think we should start assuming some of those things moving forward in college football until a lot of the rubric of the game kind of settles down. Let's get to our league, the Big Ten. I think this is how I have the league finishing. And I think those 4 teams at the top in my power ratings are demonstrably better than everybody else. But I will tell you that Illinois, USC, and Indiana power rated stronger than I thought they were going to. And they also kind of have a power rating a little bit ahead of everybody else. And I would throw Iowa in that group too. I think Iowa has the toughest schedule of the group of teams there that I mentioned, however. And then Nebraska, Washington. I think Nebraska improves by about a game or two. I think Washington improves by a couple of games. I am really worried, though, about Damon Williams at quarterback. Not because he wasn't sensational in the bowl game. It kind of reminds me of Lamar Jackson when he kind of rode the bench, learning the craft for an entire year, and they put him in one of these December, bowl games, and he lit it up, and that was kind of an omen for the season he was about to have when he won the Heisman. But he's 5'10" and 190 pounds. So remember what I just said about Devin Dampier, Utah. This is not Utah. The Big 12 is not that physical of a league. Ours is. So I really wonder about playing 9 games in the Big Ten with a quarterback that you're going to ask to use the QB run game as much as they're going to ask of him. So you can see I have Rutgers not making a bowl game. Based on this finish, you can probably count on the Wisconsin job opening up. Any thoughts on Big Ten standings? I don't have Michigan power rated as high as Ohio State and Oregon, but I do think they have I have Michigan and Oregon power rated pretty similarly. I have Ohio State power rated about 3 points ahead of Michigan on a neutral. I just think their schedule is more favorable. And I have Penn State power rated about 5 points ahead of Ohio State on a neutral, by the way. So I have them as the clear best team in the Big Ten. And you know me, I'm not I don't have to necessarily be talked into putting more pressure on James Franklin. He's one of my faves, right? Everybody knows this about me. Everybody says that. So your thoughts on how I'm predicting the Big Ten to go this year, our league?
Well, Penn State is my pick as well. And I do think Drew Aller is going to have more weapons at wide receiver. The guy that they got from Troy, I should know his name. I've been trying to forget it ever since I watched him torch the Hawkeyes in person multiple times last fall. I think that's going to be a name that I think that he's going to become a name a lot of Big Ten fans know by the end of the year. So it doesn't even matter if I can remember what his name is right now. But the wide receiver transfer from Troy, I was actually surprised he didn't get more attention from other blue bloods in the offseason transfer portal. Michigan, I'm not quite as high on them as you are. I still need to see some consistency. Ending the season the way they did, getting that quarterback, and the ensuing recruiting that they've had, I'm not denying any of that whatsoever, but I still want to see them go out there and prove that they're the second best team. Ohio, really those top 3 or 4 teams, you can kind of interchange them, especially, in my opinion, Penn State, Ohio State, and Oregon, although I'm not as high on Oregon this year as I was the Oregon team from last year, but we'll see. And then you've got that second tier of teams in there. Illinois has high aspirations this year. USC, you have to think that it's not necessarily rock bottom when we're talking about USC, but a disappointing opening salvo in the Big Ten last year. You've got to think that they have their sights set on higher things. And then Nebraska, 8-4. Let's be honest, winning one or two more games. An 8-4 season at Nebraska, given what they've been on, up trying to make this faint praise. An 8-4 season.
Are you going to say, given what Nebraska's historically been, are you going to drop that? Is that what you're doing?
I'm not. I'm really not meaning faint praise. You've got to take baby steps. Last year was a baby step.
Nice.
You know, you got to a bowl game. Going 8-4, that's a baby step in the right direction to getting them back to kind of where they were under the guy who shall not be named, the old youngster. I'm not remembering names this afternoon. It's this
Bo Pelini.
Bo Pelini, thank you. I've been eating lunch meat because we don't have a fridge yet, and I'm just going on these tryptophan crashes like Thanksgiving meal every single day this week. Apologies. But anyway, Nebraska going 8-4 would be a good season for them. In Iowa, I could see them having a demonstrably and objectively better team, maybe a better way of saying this, a more capable team than they've had for the last 3 or 4 seasons, but going like 6-6, 7-5, 8-4, just because of that schedule. It's a really tough schedule, but I'm about as excited about Iowa's schedule as I have been for any Iowa schedule for the past 5 seasons, just because they're going to be playing some stiff competition. And then the bottom half of the league, what you're telling me is Luke Fickell is getting fired. Again, we'll get into more of this. He and the next coach there, David Braun at Northwestern, I listened to both of their pressers. Don't want to spoil anything, but they do not sound comfortable. So the rest of that, not super surprising. I might say Michigan State has a possibility of doing a little bit better than 6-6, but I'm not going to make a big deal about that.
I actually thought I was actually giving him the coach there, Jonathan Smith, I'm a fan of. I thought I was actually giving him a benefit of the doubt.
You've said that the behind the scenes things are not going well.
No.
You've heard.
Yeah, not going well. The roster, I told you last year, it was a year zero roster with a playmaking quarterback, and depending on how consistent he was, and it looked like a year zero roster with a playmaking quarterback, but he ended up being inconsistent. So, let's get to some superlatives. I've got Jeremiah Smith, wide receiver, Ohio State Offensive Player of the Year in our league. I'm guessing you're okay with that?
Oh, yeah.
Caleb Downs, Ohio State Defensive Player of the Year. Guessing you're okay with that?
Yep.
Newcomer of the Year. I've got Mekhi Hughes, the Tulane running back transfer at Oregon.
He's very good.
I think he could make a Heisman run, potentially, actually. I've got Takario Davis, the defensive back at Arizona, as my defensive newcomer of the year. There wasn't a lot of options for that, and I know Michigan was very high on him, so I just kind of used that as, well, okay, then he must be really good. I've got Luke Fickell as the coach most likely to be fired. My conference upset of the year, I think Iowa's going to give Penn State its only L of the year in Iowa City. That means, yes, I do think Penn State will go to Columbus and win that game. I do think that'll happen. See, listen, man. Penn State wants all the smoke. I say we give it to them, Aaron. They want it. They want the pressure. They want people to remind them they can't get over the hump, can't win the big game. Okay. Careful what you wish for. I'm happy to hand it to you. All right. And then I think Ohio State's going to beat Texas on Big Noon Sunday or Saturday, first week of the year. Arch Manning on the road. Big step up, man, from playing UTSA and Houston. Okay.
A little bit. A
little bit of a step up there. So, and I'm a buy low on Michigan. I just don't see how it's possible they could possibly be worse than they were a year ago. I just don't think it's possible. They have 2 quarterbacks in the roster, way better than anybody they possibly played a year ago, and the schedule is way easier than it was a year ago.
What was their record last year?
7-5.
Yeah. Is there anybody saying that it's possible for them to be worse than they were last year? Because
I've heard several people say that they think maybe they'll be about an 8-win team. So, okay.
You've got them at 10 wins, 8-1, 10-3.
Is there someone else you think that would be more of a buy low, better option?
No.
Okay.
No, because Illinois, their expectations are higher than Michigan's. USC, are they?
Maybe
they're
USC.
kind of enigmatic.
USC, I could see. Yeah. USC, I could see. Okay. I could see USC being a better buy low team than Michigan because they're kind of a fringe top 25 team. And then I've got Illinois as a sell high. Listen, I think they're going to be pretty good. I just think they're kind of similar to Iowa State to me, where the receivers they had last year were way better than what they typically have, and that gave them more of a margin for error, and they don't have those guys anymore. So,
I think maybe Washington. I get your concerns about DeMond Williams.
Oh, you mean as a buy low?
Yeah.
Yeah, I could see Washington too. Yeah, I agree.
I like that quarterback, and they gave him more opportunities than just
He played some spot duty throughout the year.
Duty throughout the year, and I really like Jed Fish.
He played more than Arch Manning played last year.
Yeah. So they might be a buy low team, but other than that, Iowa, there's just too many question marks. Illinois is already, like I just said, already high expectations. So
to me, I just think Iowa's just destined to go 7-9 wins for the rest of the Ferentz era, just depending on how you think what do you think the schedule looks like? You think it's hard? You think they'll be closer to 7-5? You think it's easy? You think they'll be closer to 9-3? This is the first time in like 4 years, though, that I have not had Iowa as one of my over the win total best bets. Yeah. You know why? It's the quarterback.
He's going to be the difference between 6-6 and maybe 9-3.
Yeah.
Even.
Now I'm concerned because again, his profile at the FCS level very similar to Max Brosmer, and Brosmer ended up being a very good quarterback for Minnesota in the second half of the year. But it took him a while to make the adjustment, and he practiced. He was there all spring, all off season, totally engaged, and Gronowski's not been. That's my concern. Let's get to the SEC and just get this over with. All right, but I mean, in all
right, sounds good. Good show, Steve.
In all seriousness, it's a great league and tons of fun to watch. All right, I've got, and you can see there. I mean, basically, I have a one game swing among 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 teams. No matter, and you could come up with, what would that be? 36 different combinations of a conference championship game. All right.
I think so. Yeah.
So I'm my numbers still like Georgia, but my numbers question Georgia in the kinds of places where you don't want to be questioned: quarterback and offensive line. Let me say this: by Georgia's standards. I will tell you, my power ratings say Alabama, aside from the quarterback, is the most complete team in the country. Now, when I say that, this is not like a Nick Saban roster, but with the talent more spread out for this particular era, quarterback aside, and we'll see what they go with. They've got a former 5-star there in Ty Simpson, who's been on the bench for a couple of years. Is that because he was developing or he was overrated? Right? They brought in a top recruit that Kalen DeBoer signed at Washington. Are they going to go to him? And then they brought in the number 2 quarterback, or the number 2 or 3, depending on which service you look at, high school quarterback in Keelan Russell behind Bryce Underwood. I don't know that they would go to him right away, though, with this team, because it's pretty veteran and it's pretty natty caliber pretty much everywhere else. LSU, I know they spent big in the portal. I don't like their schedule, man. Like every difficult game they play this year pretty much is on the road. And so I think, including the opener at Clemson, and they're replacing their entire offensive line. My numbers say Texas is the most overrated team in the country, that they are a legit top 10 team, but they're, all these magazines and stuff rating them number 1. My numbers just simply do not agree with that. My numbers are actually very high on Oklahoma, and that only the schedule is going to hold them back. My numbers are also very high on Florida, and also think only the schedule is going to hold them back. So as you look throughout the rest of that league, you're still looking at some major brand programs. Ole Miss, Tennessee, still sitting there at 8-4. By the way, I mentioned Bud Elliott's blue chip ratio. For people that don't know what that is, Bud's been doing this for about 15 years or so. You have to have at least 50% of your roster. Every team for the last 15, 18 years that won the national championship had at least 50% of its roster comprised of guys who were consensus 4 or 5-star recruits in the 24/7 real politics 24/7 recruiting average of all the major services. All right, there are only 2 programs who, with a couple more good recruiting classes in a row, there's 18 of those schools that are in that list right now. He says there's only 2 teams that are only a recruiting class or 2 away from getting there. It's South Carolina and Ole Miss. So he said that these teams that are in there right now are pretty much going to be in there for the foreseeable future. They're just recruiting at a different level than everybody else. So what do you think of what I think of the SEC? Alabama over Georgia for my conference championship game.
Yeah, I'm going to need to see more from Kalen DeBoer's Alabama before and I agree. I think from what I've seen of their roster, it's very good, but I thought they had a pretty good roster last year as well. So was what we saw from Alabama last year just, we set up a new studio this week for the day job. And regardless of how smooth the transition goes, there's always going to be bumps in the road. Was that kind of Alabama last year, or was that just things are not fitting together and will not fit together? I just want to see more of it. Texas being overrated. I mean, Is that new?
It's not necessarily new.
It's not new. Is this the deepest quarterback conference?
Oh, yeah. Maybe the deepest
you've got
SEC
DJ
quarterback conference I've ever seen.
DJ freaking Lagway's team finishing 6th.
I've got a team that might have the number 1 pick in the draft going 7-5.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. That just shows you how deep this conference goes, especially at that position. So I'm not going to. It would not surprise me if some of these teams just made a nice jump, maybe not to the tier of playing in the SEC championship game, but an Auburn making a run or Ole Miss making a run.
I mean, Auburn has a ridiculous receiving core, for example.
Even Missouri, just because of Drink is a very good coach. I could see a lot of these teams surprising this season. So, as this conference is let's call it the platinum version of the Big 12. Okay.
The Big 12 with defense.
The Big 12 with the defense. Yeah, that's a good moniker for it. That's basically what this is, because I could see a lot of these teams. There's a lot of variance here. I could see a lot of these teams making runs.
I'm a little uncomfortable because if I were ranking SEC quarterbacks, Gunnar Stockton at Georgia would be near the bottom. We don't even have a guy like Diego Pavia at Vanderbilt here. I mean, Diego Pavia would. I honestly think Diego Pavia would start for every single team in our league except Penn State and Drew Eller. I think he'd start over Julian Sand. I think he'd start over Bryce Underwood. Mainly because just how young those guys are, and given he was his 9th year in college football.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Diego Pavia in our league would start for every single team other than Drew Aller at Penn State. And, he's on a team that will be lucky to go 6-6. Yeah. I think you and I both agree Lenore Sellers would start for every single team, including Penn State, in our league, right?
Yeah.
I've got him with their schedule going 7-5. Their win total is 7.5 with maybe the number 1 pick in the draft. So,
I think they should play 9 conference games.
This entire conversation is where the SEC apologists and fans are like, that's why we don't play 9 conference games, guys. This is why. Everything you're just saying right now is why we don't do that. All right. So those are my thoughts on what I think will happen in the power conferences. When we come back, let's take a look at the postseason. What do I think the final college football playoff rankings will be, the college football playoff bracket, and more next. All right, back here as we are previewing the upcoming college football season on this week's episode of Bigger 10. So after I've simulated the season based on my power ratings and predictions, this is what I believe will be the final college football playoff rankings when they are unveiled the first Saturday in December. I think Penn State will win the Big Ten and finish number 1. I think Clemson will win the ACC and finish number 2. Alabama wins the SEC and finishes 3rd with 2 losses. I think Notre Dame squeaks out a number 4 slot with 1 loss. I think Georgia's at 5, Florida 6, Oklahoma 7. I've got Florida and Oklahoma 6th and 7th with 3 losses. Michigan would actually have 3 losses by virtue of losing the conference championship game. Baylor representing the Big 12, then Ohio State, and then Texas. That's your cutoff because we still have to have a group of 5 teams. So that would be your cutoff for the college football playoff. And remember, this year now we're doing straight seeding. We're not doing any of the buys and all that other stuff. We are still having the buys, but the way we did the buys a year ago based on who won the most highest rated conferences, we're just doing straight seeding this year. So I've got Texas being the cutoff for the playoff. LSU and Miami are next with Oregon, Utah. Boise State is your highest rated group of 5. Kansas State, Arizona State, Texas Tech, SMU, Louisville, Auburn, Duke, Texas A&M, and USC. This is what I think the college football playoff rankings will be. The final ones that really matter the most. The final poll of the year, the first Saturday in December. What do you think, Aaron?
Well, I invoked his name earlier, just down there at the bottom of the rankings. Wouldn't it be hilarious if 2 years after leaving Duke, Mike Elko finally breaks back into the top 25 only to be surpassed by 1 spot by Duke? That would be funny.
Yes.
I'd love to see that happen. As far as the rest of these rankings go, have you said much about Julian Sayin, just other than you're not so sure about him? Because that's the same problem everybody has.
So here's the thing. Bobby Carpenter is a all-time great Ohio State linebacker. And he's a total meathead, and he says that as a term affectionately. He said, hey, I went to 13 of the 15 spring practices Ohio State had. And I got to tell you, I can't definitively tell you whether Julian Sayin is going to be the starting quarterback or not, based on what I saw.
I did not hear him say that.
Yeah, I heard him say that. So now, let's hit the brakes here. He's in one of the best systems in the sport. He'll
Best
have
receiving cores,
he'll have the best receiving core in the sport. Okay, so the floor here, brother, is a little higher than a lot of other people's ceilings. Okay, all right. So let's not whistle past the graveyard just yet here. Okay, but maybe, just maybe, this might in year one look a little bit like Drew Aller year one than maybe what some other people are projecting. Just saying.
So I'm not going to squabble too much with any of this. I can totally see this final ranking unfold. And notwithstanding what we talked about with the SEC and the Big 12, the SEC is what really matters here. I don't really see anything where I'm going, that's absolutely out of place. I guess I will squabble with Michigan just for sake of consistency, because I did before. I mean, that Michigan-Ohio State game, you're basically going to have that for a trip to the Big Ten championship.
Yes. In my scenario, that is correct. That would be the case.
Wouldn't that be something?
Yeah.
The rest of these, so you're telling me Boise State would be the group of 5 representative?
Yes.
Again, and I do agree with your analysis that you shared. I can't remember which show you shared it on a couple of weeks ago, that just because they're losing an all-world running back, they still have a lot coming back. For
the caliber of schedule they play. Yes.
And let's see. Texas Tech, a top 20 ranking, even though you're not finishing first in the Big 12. You don't have them finishing first in the Big 12.
No, I think they'd be disappointed. Now, listen, Texas Tech has not had a lot of seasons where it finished in the top 20.
Yeah.
All right? But I think given the money they have spent in the league of high variance they're in, I think it's possible the coach gets fired if that happens.
Yeah. The rest of these I really don't have a huge problem with. I think USC finishing in the top 25, the final rankings, I think that would obviously be enough for Mr. Lincoln Riley to keep it. Not Lincoln Riley. Yeah, Lincoln Riley to keep his job. So I don't really have any problems with the rest of this.
Texas A&M fans have got to be like, are we just going to go 8-4 every year for the rest of our lives? And apparently the answer to that question is yes. They spent $51 million on NIL.
They have a printing press down there.
Yes.
They can't do anything.
So for men's sports, we're really talking basketball and football. They spent $51 million. What they got for it was a second round exit in the NCAA tournament in an 8-4 season in football for $51 million. $51 million.
Well, that is a return on investment.
It's a return. Not necessarily a good one. All right, with that, based on these rankings, this is what I think the college football playoff bracket will be. In the first round, Boise State goes between the hedges down to Athens to take on the Dogs. Baylor heads north from Waco to Ann Arbor, Michigan, for which should be a rather snowy game. Texas and Florida face each other in a rematch in the Swamp, where they would have already played earlier in the year. And then Ohio State goes on the road to Norman, Oklahoma. So Sooner gets Michigan and Ohio State there in Norman in the same college football season. That would be the first round. I would project the quarterfinals, a Georgia-Notre Dame, because Notre Dame gets the bye. So Notre Dame goes to the Cotton Bowl. Georgia-Notre Dame rematch, what was a phenomenal, physical slugfest college football playoff game in the quarterfinal round a year ago. In the Rose Bowl, where Penn State is the bye and from the Big Ten, they would get the bid to go there. Penn State and Michigan would have a rematch in this scenario from the Big Ten championship game just 2 weeks ago. Second year in a row, the Rose Bowl would be a Big Ten season rematch. Remember, Oregon and Ohio State was the Rose Bowl a year ago. In the Sugar Bowl, where Alabama would go as the SEC champion getting the bye, they would host Texas in the Sugar Bowl there in New Orleans. And in the Orange Bowl, Clemson gets the bye from the ACC, goes there, and they would host 10th seeded Ohio State. My semifinal matchup, I think Penn State would be taking on Georgia. Georgia wins the rematch against the Irish. Ohio State pulls the upset against Clemson in the Orange Bowl and takes on Alabama in the Peach Bowl. And then I have Alabama beating Penn State for the national championship. Kind of a throwback to the Joe Pa Bear era, where they used to play pretty much on an annual basis. Some great games, including one of the great bowl games in college football history, which was also for the national championship when they were 1-2 in the country. Phenomenal story about that game, a goal line stand by Alabama. And during a timeout, Alabama coach Bear Bryant called one of the Penn State players over and said, you need to go across the sidelines there and tell Joe, don't run the football here because they ain't going to score. We're going to stop him if he does that. Joe didn't listen, ran the ball. Alabama stopped him, won the national championship. So your thoughts on my playoff bracket there. What do you think, Aaron?
Looking at the first round, what is the highest possible seed to realistically have a shot at winning a game? Probably Texas at Florida. You have Ohio State already beating Oklahoma. But I think Texas, Florida, Boise State's not going to go down to Athens and beat Georgia.
And I have Ohio State and Texas both winning.
Yeah.
In fact, yeah.
And in the quarterfinals, Ohio State versus Clemson, that would be another major upset. And Alabama, Texas, I think that's probably, that's going to be like the third or fourth time they've played in the last 2-3 seasons. Michigan versus Penn State in the Rose Bowl, you would go out to Pasadena, I have to imagine, right? I mean, that would be a heck of a Rose Bowl.
The thing is, it was the trip I made the first time was so perfect, Aaron. I mean, literally, it could not have been a better weather.
It's just going to be downhill.
Better time
there.
with the family.
It's like
incredible game and
It's
event.
like my fishing trip to the Boundary Waters. I've never been fishing since. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And it just feels like to do it again, at least so soon, it's just setting yourself up for disappointment. Yeah. You know what I'm saying?
Okay. The only thing that I want to talk about here is the national championship. I think Penn State I think I've talked myself into Penn State being the national championship, being my pick. I just have to think if they've made it to that point, the Band-Aid has been ripped off. They will have beaten at least one, top 5 team by that point, at least one. The Band-Aid will have been ripped off of Penn State. And I mean that in a good way, where it's like, we got over the hump. Now all of that pressure is off of us. We just have a game to play. I think if they make it to that point, they're winning, no matter who they play. Pick the entire field, no matter who they play. If they make it to the actual national championship game, I think they actually win the whole thing.
Because at that point, the monkey's off the back.
Correct.
Like the famous clip of Steve Young at the Super Bowl is what you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah, I could see that.
So that's the only thing that I would really squabble with. But
I have to be honest, I'm deviously just picking Penn State to win everything, to give them all the smoke they want, and then just get to the end and then lose.
Yeah.
I'm just that level of statistic. Yes.
Remember last year in...
Easy for me to say.
What was it? I was actually on James Franklin's side on some issue for once. Like, you know what? He brought up a good point, and he brought it up in a way that wasn't douchey. Mm-hmm. And then, like, the next week, he went out there and was like complaining about the media room at the Big Ten championship game.
Oh yeah, it wasn't nice enough.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's where I am, but I'd still pick them to go all the way this year. I do think Drew Aller will finally take that next step that we've been waiting for him to take for the last 4 years.
With that, here they are. And we're going to do these, and I rated them, Aaron, or listed them in order of what I think would be intriguing. All right, so the Citrus Bowl, I've got Oregon against LSU. I think there'll be a lot of eyeballs for that game. Elsewhere, what else do I have for the Big Ten? I've got your Hawkeyes in their home away from home. The artist formerly known as the Outback Bowl down there in Tampa against Auburn. I've got USC in the Alamo Bowl against Utah. That was a conference game not too long ago. In fact, those two teams played for the Pac-12 championship just a few years ago when Caleb Williams won the Heisman Trophy. I've got Illinois in the Mayo Bowl against SMU. That also, I think, would be a high-quality matchup. The Chamber of Commerce in Nashville wants to kiss me right now for Nebraska versus Tennessee. I mean, between the local fans coming from Knoxville, the amount of Nebraska fans who would travel to spend Christmas in Music City, that would be a great way to start the new year economically for the city of Nashville. Not that they need the help. All right. Let's see.
Is the Sun Bowl supposed to be South Carolina?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. My bad. And then what else for the Big Ten? How about Pitt and Indiana in the Pinstripe Bowl?
Contrast of styles there.
Yeah, that would be a contrast of styles too. Nice, but a good uniform matchup. That blue and gold versus the red and white. That would look good on TV. Minnesota versus Iowa State in the Guaranteed Rate Bowl. They actually played each other in that bowl game about 15 years ago. And where else do I have some Big Ten? Michigan State going to Detroit in what is now the Game Above Sports Bowl against Toledo out of the MAC. And then I've got UCLA getting in via APR. People forget how good of an academic school UCLA is. I've got UCLA getting in via APR in the LA Bowl against San Jose State. And I think that might be it for Big Ten teams. So what do you think? Anything stand out to you about these potential matchups that'll likely never happen?
Yeah, I mean, if I'm an Iowa fan, which I am, so I have to speak for my tribe, I think I mean, we always want to be in contention for a college football playoff, Big Ten championship. That's probably not going to happen ever. But finishing, what you have ranked as a top 3 non-college football playoff bowl, that'd be a good season. Oregon versus LSU. That's a watchable game for the Citrus Bowl. Louisville versus Kansas. I mean, I know this is not Big Ten. I always look for the Pop-Tarts Bowl because that one always seems to be lit. That would be a pretty good matchup, a fun matchup. Duke's Mayo Bowl, another contrast of styles to some degree. Illinois versus SMU. That would be a fun watch. Nebraska, Tennessee, fun watch. There's a lot of fun matchups here.
I think there actually were. Didn't intend for that to be the case. How about Memphis, Florida State? That's Mike Norvell against his old team.
And Minnesota, Iowa State, that would be a fun game to watch as well. So, yeah, I like these. I think I'll give you a passing grade on these.
How about the Independence Bowl, Army and the triple option versus Damon Williams? I mean, dude, if you like running games, that'd be a fun matchup.
Yeah.
You know? So I actually thought, I took a look at this schedule, and I didn't intend for that to be the case, but I thought there'd actually be a lot of good games to be watching over the holidays here. And, you know, none of them actually count, basically, but they'd be fun to watch nevertheless. Yeah.
Yeah, and people still watch them.
The ratings are still high. Yes.
I think that's what we learned for sure last year. I think there was some question about that a few years ago, but people still watch the bowl games.
All right, we will take one last break, come back, wrap it up with our X-Poll results and feedback of the week here next. All right, this week's X-Poll results, we asked you, who wins the Big Ten football championship this season? If you were in the Cleveland Plain Dealer poll they do every year, 39% said they're taking the field. 29% said they're taking Ohio State. 24% said Penn State. Penn State ended up eking it out over Ohio State in that poll by 1 vote. 9% say they're taking Oregon. Aaron.
A bunch of Michigan fans showed up in this.
To vote for the field. Yeah, or Iowa fans both probably too, yes. Yeah. All right, so what do you think? How, do you agree with the results? How would you have voted?
No, I would have voted for Penn State. I wasn't sold on Julian Sayin before you told me what Bobby Carpenter mentioned about seeing his practices. I wasn't sold on him. And I'm not discounting Ohio State's going to be great, okay? I just think Penn State, this is the year they finally get over the hump. I think Drew Aller has all the weapons. I mean, we haven't said a word about their backfield, but that's going to be their fundamental building block. Mm-hmm. They're great in the trenches. I mean, they just have all of the elements you would need if you were looking just blind and you take away all the names and personalities. To me, they are kind of like, they stack up like Oregon stacked up last year. And Oregon
it's
won
the same formula.
Yes.
Michigan used and Ohio State used. Use your NIL to bring back all your second and third day draft picks, right? Have the 2 stud tailbacks. Michigan had Corum and Edwards, okay? And Penn State or Ohio State had Judkins and Travion last year. So you're coming back with Katron and Singleton this year, right? You have the soft schedule, like nobody in the non-conference that matters, so you can kind of amp up. Both Michigan did that in 23. Ohio State did that last year. Penn State has the same thing this year. I mean, the thing is, can the Big Ten do this to the sport with this formula 3 years in a row? It is no coincidence that when everybody could start paying everybody above board, the Big Ten won the last 2 national championships. That is not a coincidence, folks. Not a coincidence. Which brings us to the feedback of the week. Speaking of national championships, this is the last time every team in our league has won a natty. Of course, Ohio State last year, Michigan 2 years ago, USC in 2004, Nebraska in 97 when they shared it with now Big Ten colleague Michigan, Washington in 91, Penn State in 86, Michigan State in 1966 when they shared it with Notre Dame, Minnesota in 1960, Iowa in 1958 under Forrest Evashevsky, UCLA all the way back in 1954, Maryland in 1953, Illinois has got to go all the way back to 1927, and then Rutgers, I guess, by winning the very first ever college football game in 1869, won the national championship that year. Oregon, Indiana, Purdue, Northwestern, Wisconsin have never won one. And that prompted the question from Bergie Hawk, if Rutgers is credited with winning a natty for winning the first game ever played and the only game played in the year of 1869, why are they seriously in this conference? You know, that's actually a good question. Because when we first did this with them, it was all about brand, or not about brands, but market sizes, Aaron. And Rutgers meant you got automatic access to basic cable throughout the tri-state area. Now it's about brands.
Now in the year 2025, what is cable?
Yeah, exactly. So now it's about brands. I mean, straight up, would you trade Rutgers for North Carolina if you were the Big Ten?
Hell yes.
Would you trade Rutgers for Virginia?
Yes.
Would you trade Rutgers for Virginia Tech?
Yeah, yep.
I mean, see, notice I'm just staying in the ACC, right? Okay. I think the answer to a lot of those questions, you trade Rutgers for Miami of Florida.
Yes. Oh, yeah. In a heartbeat.
Rutgers for Florida State.
Yep.
Yeah. So Yeah.
Sorry to the 2 Rutgers fans that are
Indeed.
watching.
Thoughts and prayers, pour one out. And we'll see you next week here on the show. Indeed. All right, that'll do it for this week's episode of Bigger Ten. We're back at it again next week. We'll have a full breakdown of what we did or didn't learn from Big Ten Media Days, what was said that stood out to us. So make sure you're tuned in for that. In the meantime, follow us in between episodes on X at Bigger Ten, at Bigger Ten on X. Don't forget to like, rate, subscribe, share, 5-star review, do all those things to help us find more Big Ten fans just like you. For Aaron McIntyre, I'm Steve Dace. We'll see you next week right here on Bigger Ten.
Thank you.